donation today to Community Church. We want to thank them for the use of the space. They are facing a financial challenge. This is an important institution for the progressive movement in Boston. It's important that we come together and support them. I think Amar is going to put a link in the chat of how you can donate, but for the people here, Amar, how do they donate? Or Charlie? Oh, they're going to pass around a collection basket. Great. Thanks. So a little election happened last week, and we're here to hear from one of the peace movement's preeminent leaders to get an interpretation. It's been more than a year of a genocide in Gaza. The genocide is getting worse. It's spreading to the Middle East. We now have an entire, almost half of Gaza cordoned off where all the civilians, it's like a free fire zone. It's a starvation zone. And so the situation is acute, and yet we can see that both major political parties stand for genocide. So what is to be done? How can we politically move in the current situation? There's actually stuff going on in Congress, believe it or not, and I think Medea might touch on that. And also, how do we move in the current political climate? So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it to Medea Benjamin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. To commiserate and to energize ourselves about where we're going. Maybe just to start out, we could get a little audience participation in why do you think Kamala Harris lost? Just shout it out. What? Too much like a Republican. And I would add to that, too much like a Democrat who was in the White House, so too much like Biden, in that she had a chance to distinguish herself on a number of issues and didn't do it. Palestinian lives matter. And, you know, it's interesting in the analysis, you don't hear it a lot because people are just looking at things like the third-party vote, which wasn't very big. But I think a big contributor was how many people didn't vote because they were so disgusted with her policy on supporting Israel. Being a woman, yes, there are certainly people in this country that didn't vote for her because she's a woman. What else? Being a black woman, there's a lot of racism in this country, so that certainly is a factor. Anything else? Abandon the working class. And, you know, this is something that Bernie Sanders has come out. He knows how to walk a very fine line because he doesn't want to totally criticize his own party, but he wants to say the truth, which is that the party has abandoned the working class. And so I think that analysis, who knows if that's something that's going to sink in this time around. But certainly the fact that there are so many working class people that voted for Trump should be a real wake-up call on that front. And let's remember, while many of us in this room, the issue of Gaza might be our #1 issue, for the majority of Americans, it's the economy, the economy, economy. And while the Democrats keep telling them, everything's good in this country, it's going great, people are not feeling that way. Anything else? She didn't have an agenda, right? And towards the end, it was a lot of the agenda is Trump is a fascist. You know, Trump is awful, Trump is this, Trump is that. And in the beginning, it was joy, which was really kind of weird. There was a joy for a week that it wasn't Biden. But after that, you know, people wanted some more substance. If Biden had pulled out sooner, there would have been a primary, candidates would have been tested, it would have been a different story for sure. The DNC did not want a primary, and let's face it, the DNC doesn't want progressives either. Look what they did to Bernie Sanders. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that in essence, you know, it is so crazy to run a campaign where you're saying you're change. People want change. And yet you're saying you're going to, there's nothing when asked directly, is there anything that you would do that different from Biden? She said no. So, you know, it was a very incoherent message. Because of the support for Israel. Yeah. So certainly this goes back to the issue of the Israel policy in Gaza. There are significant numbers of people, and it's not just in Dearborn, Michigan. It's in many places around the country that just would not vote for any Democrat. So any final ones? Yeah? Can you believe that she had as a spokesperson for her a Cheney, and even said thank you to your father for his service to our country. And, you know, when she could have been going around with progressives, instead she chose to go around with Lynn Cheney. So I think that's a kind of a good summary of the number of reasons. But I also think we have to be careful now as we move forward, because we have to recognize that there's a heck of a lot of people in this country and a heck of a lot of good people in this country who voted for Donald Trump. And I don't know, raise your hand if you have a friend or a relative or somebody who you actually kind of like who voted for Donald Trump. So look around the room, you know. So we have to be careful the way we talk now. And if we don't want to alienate millions and millions of people for no good reason, let's talk about the policy issues, how we're going to change those policy issues, and not so much about fascism, the country is going to be destroyed, there's no democracy left, we'll never have another election again. I don't think that kind of perspective is very helpful. So, in my work in Congress, and I have never spent more time in Congress than I have this last year. Believe me, it's not something I enjoy. But ever since October 7th, well, it's pretty funny. We had been in Congress right before October 7th because I had written a book about Ukraine and wanting to push for negotiations. And we realized that Bernie Sanders had once talked about negotiations and had totally flipped around and was all for supporting the war in Ukraine. And we went and did a protest in his office that week of November 7th, right before. And that's why some of us were in Washington. And lo and behold, October 7th happened. We said, uh-oh, we better stay here. So I've been going with a group of wonderful people that changes every single day in Congress. And the thing that's kept me inspired to get up in the morning after I turn on Al Jazeera and I see how many were killed the day before is the people that have been going with us in Congress. They are Palestinians, they are Egyptians, they're Pakistanis, they're Jews with Jewish Voice for Peace, they're young, they're old, people bringing their children. We had a woman who is 9 months pregnant, and she was on maternity leave, and she would come every day. And we said, water hasn't broken yet, you're still here today. And she would say, I can't think of anything more important while I'm bringing a new life into this world than to be here trying to change a policy that's killing children every day. And then she gave birth, and she's back again now on her maternity leave. So these kind of people are so inspiring. And so there are some things that we face no matter who is in the White House. And one of them, as we know, is AIPAC. AIPAC is such a pernicious influence on our system. It's unbelievable. And this is something that goes back before there was even an AIPAC, and there were other pro-Israel lobbies that were doing similar kinds of things, which is not only buying politicians, but putting the fear of being a target into politicians. And this affects almost everybody in the entire Congress, in both the House and the Senate. And we've seen it in past years, how they have taken people out, put their people in. And we saw it so recently in the Democratic primaries when they took out two of our best people in Congress. And that was Jamal Bowman, a former principal of a high school, somebody who was really very fiery about the need for education in this country and all kinds of important things, and Cori Bush, who is one of the best fighters, not just for the people of Palestine, because she was the one that put forward the first ceasefire resolution just 2 weeks after October 7th, but she was one who was sleeping out at the Capitol steps to try to stop evictions during COVID. She is someone who came out of the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, she is somebody that we really, it was such a treasure for us to have her in Congress and to see AIPAC be able to throw their money around and destroy, at least for the time being, their careers. So I think both of them are going to want to try again. But it sends a really, really strong message. And AIPAC has been bragging about, 90% or 95% of the people they endorsed have gotten in. But let's not forget that there are some people who have been going up against AIPAC who handily won their races. And that's people like Rashida Tlaib, who has tremendous support. People like Ilhan Omar. People like Ayanna Pressley. There's a guy, Mark Pocan, who is, some of you know, from Madison, Wisconsin. He has had an ongoing Twitter, you're not supposed to call it Twitter anymore, whatever, back and forth with AIPAC. And AIPAC can't stand him. And yet he handily won his election. And there's one Republican who, if you haven't heard of, you should look up. And that is Tom Massie. So raise your hands if you don't know much about Tom Massie. Okay, so you all got to learn about Tom Massie because there are so few people in the Republican Party that are true libertarians that really don't want U.S. intervention. And he's a strange one. I think he's the one that at his Christmas card was there with his family with AK-47s. They love their guns. But when it comes to war issues and U.S. involvement in those issues, he is fantastic. And he did this amazing interview with Tucker Carlson, which you have to go and look up, because he exposed to millions of people what AIPAC does. And he says that every member of Congress, he was talking about Republicans, but he figured it was the same in the Democratic Party, they all have what he calls an AIPAC babysitter. And I love that term, a babysitter. And it's somebody in their district who is assigned to that person. And that's the clever thing, about AIPAC. It's not just about giving money. It's also organization. And I have been told that they out-organize us like 10 to 1. When they get people to call, they flood the offices with calls. So let's not kid ourselves. It's not just about money. So they have an AIPAC person who has their cell phone number, who they talk to on a regular basis, who they go out to lunch with, and who they check in with on all kinds of issues related to issues that AIPAC cares about. And Tom Massie has been attacked by AIPAC, particularly after that interview. They put hundreds of thousands of dollars into his campaign, and he won handily as well. So AIPAC is not all powerful. And thanks to many of the Jewish groups like Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now, and others who have a Reject AIPAC campaign, it is becoming very uncomfortable for some of the more progressive members of Congress to take AIPAC money. And that's something we have to really be pushing for. Another influence that has become so vivid to me in this last year that I knew so little about is Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism is more important factor than Jewish Zionism when it comes to our Congress. They are enormous. They say just one group, Christians United for Israel, CUFI. They say they have 10 million members. And I actually don't really doubt that, because they have mega churches. They have huge influence in many areas of our country. And you see their influence in Congress because they get their people elected. So we have some really nutty people in Congress. And I say this, I said we shouldn't talk that way about, Trump supporters, but these people really do believe that they support Jews going back to Israel because that will hurry up the second coming, when Christ will come down again, and first he came as a savior, and now he's coming for Judgment Day, and he's going to judge everyone, and those who don't convert are all going to go to hell, and that's the majority of Jews and everybody else. And, it's going to be great for the believers. And they really believe this stuff. And this becomes very difficult, because how do you talk to people like that? How are you going to find the way to insert some rationality into that kind of conversation? And some of these people are real haters when it comes to Palestinians. And I just want to read you some of the words of one of them, Lindsey Graham, who is a very senior member of the Senate. Lindsey Graham is a really nasty person. And he says things like, the most radicalized people in the planet live in the Gaza Strip. They have been taught from birth to hate the Jews, kill them all, and drive them into the sea. Now, I have been to Gaza 7 times. Every time I go, I make it very clear, I am Jewish. I went with Norman Finkelstein to Gaza. They said, oh, the 2 Jews, we love you. Thank you so much for coming here. Lindsey Graham says, how do you teach math in Gaza? If you had 10 Jews and you killed 6 of them, how many would you have left? That's what's taught in the books, in the schools in Gaza, what he says. It's totally, totally false. He says, the reason so many Palestinians are dying is because Hamas wants them to die. So I don't want to take pressure off Hamas militarily. I'm all for Israel having the time and the space to destroy them. We are in a religious war here, and I am with Israel. Whatever the hell you have to do to defend yourselves, level the place. Heck, let's remember the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on cities in Japan to end World War II. So Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state. Whatever you have to do. That's Lindsey Graham. That's racist, it's disgusting, and it's unfortunately what a number of members in Congress believe. And then let's not forget another key element of what we're up against, which is the military-industrial complex. And it is so huge. I mean, I'm sure that here at your universities, you have all kinds of contracts, MIT, with the Pentagon. There's so much money, so much of our taxpayers' money that gets funneled into these companies. And then they have more lobbyists than there are members of Congress. And they love war. So they have plans to just keep wars going, whether it's in the Middle East or Russia or China, that's their plans. And I just heard last week that Boeing signed a new agreement to sell, let's see how much it was, $7 billion worth of weapons to Israel. No, a $5 billion sale. The delivery of these F-15s, guess what year the delivery starts? 2031. 2031. So no matter who is in the White House, they plan to keep supporting Israel for decades to come. They've just made a deal to deliver the highest tech F-15s ever produced, but they won't be delivered to Israel until starting in 2031. So the changes that we make, they're trying to make it insignificant because there will still be all of these weapons being sent to Israel. So we have major factors that make it difficult for us to have inroads in our government. But now we have Trump in the White House. Now, we probably have different analyses here about how different Trump is from Kamala Harris. We know they both are tremendous supporters of Israel. We can talk about the things that Trump did when he was in power that showed his absolute, as they love to say, ironclad, I hate that word, ironclad support for Israel. But there are openings as well. And we have to be clever, creative about using those openings. Now, Trump says different things to different people. And you might have noticed that as it got closer to the elections, and he realized that there was a group of people, Muslim community and others, who didn't like Kamala Harris because of her positions on Israel, he started moving closer to some of the Muslim community. And you might have even seen that in one of his rallies, he asked members of the Muslim community to come up and be in a photo op with him and had a talk with them. People say that one of his daughters, Tiffany, is married to a Lebanese man who actually helped to get some of the Muslim community involved. So there's, some opening family-wise there because we only had Jared Kushner the last time around. But listen to the different kind of things that Trump says. At one moment he said, unlike Kamala, I will support Israel's right to win its war. Gotta finish it. And then he turned around and he said, let's get back to peace and stop killing people. It's very, very dangerous, Trump and his support for a war in Iran, because let's remember he was the one that took the US out of the Iran nuclear deal, and it's a very, very, very dangerous time now. But he said two different things about that. He said at one point, Israel should hit Iran's nuclear facilities, something that at least the Biden administration didn't want Israel to do. But then he goes around another time and said, what are we doing in these countries? We blow them up, then we leave. We got nothing except dead people on both sides. How stupid are we? So there were certainly people who voted for Trump because they thought, just like the first time around that he ran, that there was more of a possibility of getting out of wars with Trump than there was with the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party is seen by many people now as the party of war. So let's talk a minute about Ukraine. There was a time, a long time ago, when there were, I think it was 18 members of the Progressive Caucus in the House that signed a letter saying maybe it would be good if there were negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. Yeah, maybe it was maybe more like 30. They got slapped down immediately by their own party. Within 24 hours, they withdrew that letter. And you haven't heard a peep from one of them ever since then about the war in Ukraine, about how it could turn into a nuclear war, about how war isn't good for our economy, about how we're spending $200 billion, way more than in Israel, on this war in Ukraine. Nothing. So the only ones that are talking about maybe it's time to end the war in Ukraine are a faction of the Republican Party. And they are fighting it out right now as we speak in terms of who are going to be the ones that ascend to the cabinet positions, who are going to be the key ones in the Republican Party. Now, I don't know about you, but I thought it was very good news to just learn that Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley are not going to be in the administration. So let's have some applause for that. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, the others are going to be worse. Maybe they are, but just not having to see those faces will be so nice. So an interesting person in this new administration is the vice president, is J.D. Vance. You know, J.D. Vance does not like continuing to spend money on the war in Ukraine. He voted against the package for war in Ukraine. And even people who are total hawks, like Senator Marco Rubio, who is now trying really hard to get in there and be Secretary of State, he came onto national television and he said, why are we funding this war in Ukraine? There is a stalemate. Why do we keep funding it? But there are other people in the Republican Party who are determined to keep funding that war. So there is division there. Now, where do we stand? Raise your hand if you'd like to see negotiations instead of ongoing war in Ukraine. All right, so it's just about everybody in this room. So we have got to force the Democrats to start coming out and saying it is time to end that war and, of course, all wars. But I would take a challenge to you to get Ayanna Pressley to say she would like to see negotiations and an end to the war in Ukraine. That is my challenge to you. But by the next time I come here, she would have been out front because she was on the original letter calling for negotiations.
She never, what's the word?
Recanted.
Yeah, she never withdrew it. She never said anything about it again, but she never said, sorry, I didn't mean to sign that letter.
Right, right. So we need the progressives in the Democratic Party to not let it be just the Republicans that are saying no to that war. Now, when it comes to the war in Gaza, it's very hard to find Republicans other than people like Tom Massey. And there we need to really shore up the Democrats on this. And that's the opportunity that we have with Bernie Sanders and the Joint Resolution of Disapproval that he introduced, that will be the first time ever in the history of this country that there will be a vote on the floor to restrict some of the weapons going to Israel. Clap. That is an opportunity. Now let's be realistic. It's not going to pass. But it's a chance for us to get our senators on record of where they are. Because let's remember, their position is completely against the position of public opinion. Public opinion has shown since way back in October, the majority of people wanted a ceasefire, and it was 80% of Democrats. And then when the question has been asked about sending weapons to Israel, I find it remarkable that given what the White House says, given what the mainstream corporate media has been saying, you still find a majority of Americans that don't want to send weapons to Israel. So these Democrats now have a chance to show that they're actually listening to their constituents instead of to some lobby group that is lobbying for a foreign country. And right now, we only have Bernie Sanders, we have Jeff Merkley from Oregon, we have Peter Welch from Vermont, and we have Schatz from Hawaii, who signed on to one of the six. There are 6 different ones, and they're different weapons systems. And it is so horrific that the nice liberal Elizabeth Warren hasn't signed on to this yet. Boo! And I know it's not because you all haven't flooded her with phone calls, with emails, gone to events, and let's give a hand to the people who have interrupted her at her events. And give a hand to MAPA for all the work the Massachusetts Peace Action has done to try to get her. Yeah.
So Wednesday, we will be down at the JFK Federal Building to turn in organizational sign-on letters as well as letters signed by individuals calling on them. And we want every organization to sign that letter and also to show up and speak on Wednesday, I think it's 12:30 at the JFK Federal Building. And it looks like we'll have a second group in Springfield also, because they also have offices over there. And actually, Jose and Charlie, I don't think I saw community church on the list yet, so be sure to sign, and everyone who belongs to an organization.
So I am excited about seeing in the, because this vote is going to happen very soon. It will probably happen the week after this. We're not sure because it's Chuck Schumer who gets to determine when time will be given to have this debate on the floor, but it should come up very soon. So raise your hand if you're willing to make a call every day for the next week to Elizabeth Warren and to Markey, right? Every single day. And there are flyers here. Do we want to pass around? So we need you to make those calls every single day. Now, it would be, what we're thinking is that if we get 20 senators, that would be extremely significant. That would send a major message to Biden during this lame duck time to the White House that there are a lot of members of the Senate who really want to see a change. So it is super, super important. And I want to close by saying that it has been so hard with a Democrat in the White House to get Democrats to do the right thing. I am not happy that there is Trump in the White House, believe me. But it is going to be much easier for us with Trump in the White House to get many Democrats to suddenly realize, oh, there is a genocide going on. I didn't see it for the last year. And so now really there is an opening for us to reach a bunch of them. And I want to give you one example. There was an opportunity to have the fabulous UN rapporteur, Francesca Albanese. If you don't know her name, look her up. She's just brilliant. And she was in Washington just for a day. And we said, could you carve out an hour and come to Congress? It was during this election time, so the Congress people wouldn't be there, but their staff needs to hear from you. And she said, yes, I can do that. So we were all excited, and we said, we're going to get a progressive member of Congress, and we went to Andre Carson, who is a Muslim, black congressperson, liberal guy, has been very good on this issue, and his staff said, yes, we would love to do that. Got the room, got everything, the menu set up, everything. And then an article came out in a magazine called Jewish Insider that said, oh my God, Andre Carson is hosting the UN rapporteur who is an anti-Semite. Now, come on, we know how that label is thrown around to anybody who criticizes Israel. She is no anti-Semite. She is a brilliant, lawyerly, professional person who has done her job beautifully. And Andre Carson's office got cold feet because they got calls from higher up in the Democratic Party. You can't do this. It shows the divisions in the party right now. Divisions in the party to have a UN rapporteur speak to the staff. So we had to cancel it. Now that kind of thing won't be happening anymore because there won't be the Democrat in the White House that sends the messages down to say, don't host a UN rapporteur. Now we'll have a chance to have more open discussion with a lot of members of the Democratic Party who are too afraid to go against Biden administration. So while we are mourning the idea of having to see Trump in that White House for the next 4 years, let's recognize that there are opportunities for us. And let's also recognize that we can't afford the luxury of being in a state of despair, in a state of depression, in an idea of, you know, it's all so messed up, I'm not going to do anything, I'm too afraid, they're going to be coming after us, which they are going to be coming after us. And the only way to deal with that is through organizing, 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 solidarity with the migrant community, with the members of the, especially in the Palestinian community, with all those communities who are going to be targeted. But despair is not an option. So as we go forward, let's think of this moment. And I have been amazed just in the few days in my hometown in Washington, D.C., how much organizing has suddenly sprung up. And all of these people that I haven't seen in ages, the Women's March came out, you know, and now we got to go against Trump and what he's going to do to women's rights. And the migrant community obviously has to really, really organize for immigration rights. And the black community is getting involved again and organizing. There were 1,000 people in a church where the other day where generally we would get 20 people out. So people are coming out, people are ready, people are organizing. We do have opportunities. So as we go forward, let's remember we're in step. The Palestinians have the public opinion on their side. The Palestinians have the International Court of Justice on their side. They have the International Criminal Court on their side. They have the General Assembly of the United Nations on their side. They have world public opinion on their side. And they have us, the activists here in the belly of the beast, on their side. Let's keep going until Palestine is free. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Woo!
Thank you, Medea.
So we have time for discussion.
Comments and questions?
I have one, maybe a little correction, three little corrections.
3 corrections, wow.
I use the term libertarian.
Uh-huh.
It was first used by French anarchists to mean real freedom. Libertarians in the United States are propertarians. They want to get rid of the government and turn over society to people with money. Be very careful of Tom Massey. He's a born in the wool reactionary. The second question is the left never talks about what I call the Church of Militarism, the Pentagon. They use a phrase, full spectrum dominance. And that means that they want the rest of the world to fear them. They don't want you to love the United States for democracy. They want fear and do what we say. And the left never talks about that. And it's an important issue. And the third thing I would say to you is, you know, I ran for mayor of Amesbury, not to win, Amesbury, Massachusetts, but I said I want to educate my fellow workers on important issues. Politicians just want to win. They want power. They're egotists. And politicians should really educate people. The election period should be one of education. And we can easily get money out of politics. I mean, with the old phrase, we have the best government that money can buy. And we can easily change that. Thank you.
I hate to express my worries when you ended on such a positive note, but I have to be honest. As people, I'm Arab American, I'm Lebanese American, and my daughter was one of the school activists. I'm a faculty activist. My daughter was arrested October 25th of 2023, and we're still suffering the consequences. So when you say organizing, I love it. And part of the reason I love what you guys do is you know what the lines are and how to do it and be loud, but be careful and protect yourselves. And I feel like even in the circumstances where we felt protected because of freedom of speech and all of that bullshit that we now know is bullshit, in this next iteration, I feel like we are less safe, and I wonder if you have any thoughts about how to continue to organize and do it with minimum risk, because that's what I'm most worried about. We're all exhausted, and we're worried about what the risks mean in the next iteration.
Well, thank you for that sobering comment, and I don't want to minimize the risk. And what has happened to students under a Democratic administration has been just horrific. And any idea that there is free speech in this country has just been washed away, seeing the police being called and brutally taking down encampments and expelling students and arresting students, just been horrific. But to say it happened under a Democratic administration, they don't want the voice, especially of young people, because the young people are the future of this country. The young people are the moral center of this country. The young people were sending such a beautiful message to the people of Gaza and inspiring them. And that was so dangerous for this administration. And for the administrations and the universities themselves and their big donors. So we know that we're going to see a lot of that, and we know that the students are trying to find ways themselves. And I've been so inspired by seeing some of them. For example, the study-in that was done, I think, at Harvard, where they all went and had the signs on their computers and sat there studying and had other signs on them. And the one that I really loved was the pray-in. A lot of these members of Congress, because it's a brilliant way to do it. You know, when the Christians United for Israel were having their gathering and they had the lobby day, I was in the atrium of the Senate building and saying to them, let's hold hands. We need to come together. We need to pray for the, and they were like, yeah, pray. I said, for the children of Gaza. And they're like, ah. And I finally got a couple of them to hold hands. We've got to be more creative. We've got to find ways. We have to have more protection from the people who are in positions of power that might be able to help protect us. We need a lot more of our lawyer friends. We need a lot more of the know your rights kind of trainings. I know that already for the immigrant community, they're starting to go back to the idea of sanctuary churches where people could come and be safe, getting neighbors ready, that if somebody comes for one person, you're coming for all of us. We have to learn and find ways, as you say, to make sure that we're not silenced, but to protect ourselves. And in many ways, we can't protect ourselves, and we have to deal with the consequences of that. And they can be very, very difficult. I mean, I know young people whose careers have already been ruined because they are facing charges, they've lost their funding, they've been expelled, and that is tragic. And we have to find ways and create structures to support these young people. Faculty are often doing a fabulous job trying to create those support systems. And I do want to say on the positive note, because I'm always the glass half full, that many of the people who have resigned from government positions, whether they are in the State Department, people in the White House, people in the National Security Council, people who have left in Congress very upset in their staff, almost all of them have not only landed on their feet, they're in a better position than they were before because their employers now will embrace them for speaking the truth. And we have enough organizations now that are trying to create employment opportunities. Many of our organizations have grown during this period, and people are giving a lot more of their funding to see organizations grow. So that there can be opportunities for these people who have been so courageous and stepped out and are now finding places. And there's new organizations that are being created, like Josh Paul, who left the State Department, with Tarek Abash, who left the Department of Education, have created a group called New Policy. So there's lots of things that are happening to catch people when they either resigned or are kicked out, and try to make sure there are some places for them to land. So there's a common thread, which is American exceptionalism, and this goes back to the comment earlier about, that the U.S. thinks it has the right to determine what happens all around the world, and has not gotten even used to the fact that we are living in a multipolar world right now, and that the U.S. cannot enforce its hegemony on the rest of the world anymore. And we're seeing how the coalition of groups called BRICS, that was originally Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has grown now and incorporated, I think, 15, but at their last meeting, there were like 30 countries that came, heads of state that came to that meeting. And they are trying to find all kinds of ways to isolate themselves from the effects of the United States, whether it's sanctions or military interventions. So the world is evolving. We in this room might see that as a very positive thing, but those who are clinging to power, and many of them are in both of the parties, are having a hard time coming to grips with the world isn't what they thought it was going to be.
What about, is it effective, or I don't really. Go ahead. I'm thinking of coalitions with labor groups, religious groups. Do you find that effective? Have, any, I know there are some labor groups that have supported Free Palestine. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we have all been working very hard, and Cole, you might want to say what you have been doing to form coalitions.
Well, 7 national labor unions came out for a ceasefire in Gaza, and they all have branches here. We actually need to get better organized in terms of reaching out from the peace movement to their locals here. I think we just have 2 labor groups signed on to our letter so far. The Mass Teachers Rank and File and one of the UFCW locals. So we can do better, but we need actually a group of people to focus on that and labor outreach from the peace perspective. Jose's got a comment.
We have to just keep building broader and broader. And many of us this last year have been working very hard to try to get environmental groups on board on this. I mean, what is happening in Gaza and now Lebanon is ecocide. And it's been very hard to get some of these groups. I just saw this morning a beautiful little clip on social media of Greta Thunberg, who has been so wonderful in connecting the issues of the environment and Palestine, and calling people to get out and protest the Turkish government that has been saying that it has stopped its trade with Israel and stopped any kind of weapons, but still sends gas to Israel. And so there's going to be protests tomorrow worldwide that some of the environmental groups who want to see us move away from fossil fuels are going to do at Turkish consulates and Turkish embassies around the world. Yeah, I mean, Sean Fain has come out and they called for a ceasefire months ago. They did a press conference in Congress with members of Congress. The AFL-CIO put out a very, very mild kind of statement. It's hard to move them, but the unions, individual ones themselves, what did you say, 15 of them?
I think 7 national.
7 national, and then a lot of local ones as well. People have been working with longshoremen to try to get them to be supporting the campaign to stop the shipment of weapons and other supplies to Israel.
Let's go to Jose. He has something.
Thank you. Thank you, Medea and Cold Pink for being here and informing us, challenging us, talking us about what can be done with a very optimistic message. And as far as calls, invitation, please include Community Church of Boston as a co-sponsor and as a supporter, of course. A question, in these 60 days that we have left, and I'm sure MAPA and other organizations here are constantly working the issue of Cuba to be removed from the list of sponsors of terrorism. Is there any room to finally, on grounds of morality, self-respect, justice, challenge the Democratic Party and the Biden administration to do something finally? Is there any room?
Yeah, it is so heartbreaking to see that Biden in this entire time has not gone back to the Obama policy of having relations, diplomatic relations with Cuba, and has instead even made the Trump policies worse, because the economic situation after COVID has been very difficult in Cuba. And Biden has been enforcing all of the sanctions that were put on by the Trump administration, and of course the sanctions that go back 60 years. So it is heartbreaking what they are doing to Cuba. And to put Cuba, I mean, it was Trump that put Cuba on the list of state sponsors of terrorism. Biden could have taken him off in one day when he came in. And there's been so much pressure on Biden to do it, and he hasn't done it because all they cared about were votes in southern Florida. And they lost their votes. Florida is a red state, so maybe now they will, in this last period, recognize they're not going to get Florida. Why don't you do something to help the Cubans? And there was an earthquake this morning in Cuba. I don't know if you read about it. Cuba just had a hurricane that destroyed its grid. It just had an earthquake. Cuba's getting hit everywhere, every day. They just can't catch a break. And it would be very important, I think, in this last time, and even using the hurricane and the earthquake, because, you know, they need excuses to do something good, to say, you know, before you go out, take Cuba off the state sponsor of terrorism list, because we know it's not going to happen under Trump.
Okay, let's go to Paul.
Medea, just wondered what your thoughts are on in terms of how we deal with the whole movement around anti-Semitism and how that's impacting our work.
Well, the way the accusations of anti-Semitism are just thrown around, and how it has become, they have been so successful in getting rid of everyone from college presidents to a UN rapporteur, and of course probably most of the people here have been accused of anti-Semitism. And look what just happened now in Amsterdam, and how it's weaponized so much. I mean, here you had these I haven't heard the word hooligan in a long time, but people have been using the word hooligans, you know. And you see videos of them tearing down the Palestinian flags from people's homes, and the chanting of horrible anti-Arab chants, and being protected by the police. And then in some of the media, that's not even brought in the context. It's just that pro-Israel supporters have been attacked, and this is like pogroms, and this is anti-Semitism on a new scale. You know, it's really tough because you can't deny it. Anti-Semitism exists. Anti-Semitism is a horrible thing. We all want to fight anti-Semitism, but let's not pretend that anti-Israeli sentiment is anti-Semitism. It is not. But that is what they want to, that's what they've already passed in a number of state legislatures. That's what they're trying to pass on a national level. It passed the House, and we thought it would never get brought up in the Senate, so we didn't work too hard on it. But now we're seeing that maybe it will get brought up in the Senate. And so it's really, it's really a very hard thing to fight against, but we have to fight against it. We have to fight against it on the legislative level. We have to fight against it on the legal level. And thank goodness there are groups like Legal and some of the lawyers groups and some of the human rights organizations that have come out and said that anti-Semitism cannot be equated with anti-Israel policies. We have to do a better job in shoring up those people on our side who can counter those and not just let it slide. And I think every time that somebody has been accused of anti-Semitism and is losing their job because of that, we have to gather around those people. We have to find ways to make sure they don't get fired, they don't get expelled. We have to fight for our First Amendment rights of free expression, but it's going to be very hard under this Trump administration.
I'm going to add a word on that. For the Massachusetts, just as an update, the legislature passed a amendment in the budget in July that established a state commission on anti-Semitism. And it is packed with the pro-Israel leaders of the state. The ADL is at the core of it. They have this report on anti-Semitism. They say that anti-Semitic incidents have increased, but they have no clear definition of what they even mean by anti-Semitism. So anybody says it was an anti-Semitic incident, they put it on the list. It's bullshit. And so, but they're at the core of this commission, so they're going to try to push curriculum standards into the schools, and they're going to try to change the hate laws to make anti-Semitic speech a hate crime and stuff like that. So an alignment has come together called Together for an Inclusive Massachusetts to try to rebut this. And I was actually at an all-day retreat yesterday where they were making strategies. We were making strategies to try to Together for an Inclusive Massachusetts. It hasn't really come out with the public announcement yet, but that will come soon. Zarina, you got a question? Sorry to be tough on you. Let me go to Xianghua.
Thanks for organizing this call. And Medea, thank you so much for your talk. The way that you are so connected to the grassroots while doing the DC work, direct action, lobbying, just everything. It's just such a blessing for all of us. I wanted to ask you about criminalization. So even under the Democratic administration, there's been hearings by the House Ways and Means and legislation, looking to empower the Treasury Secretary to just kind of suspend or shut down, take IRS tax-exempt status away from nonprofits, or a lot of dozens of groups receiving letters, for congressional inquiries. How do you, at the worst of it, actually adding more groups to the OFAC terrorist list? So do you see this happening? Is this going to be part of the day one, shock and awe, let's just shut down all these activist organizations? And, where a lot of organizations are trying to be prepared as much as possible, but what kind of forms of attack would you say we should be prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, we have seen this building up, this McCarthy-like atmosphere that exists both in the accusations of anti-Semitism and accusing our organizations of supporting Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. They say that if you're doing this work, you're supporting Hamas. And many of our organizations already have several lawsuits against us. It is very difficult and time-consuming to fight the lawsuits. It is, I think, the fact that many of us have been able to come together as groups of organizations, get good lawyers, thankfully, have some good strategies going forward that we can use collectively, knowing that an injury to one is an injury to all. You go after one of us, we all have to be there for you. And it seems like they're taking off the ones that are the easiest, where they can say that this group is actually giving, like Samidoun, that this group is giving monetary support to Hamas. We have to be there for all the organizations and forget any kind of differences we might have in how we talk about Hamas, look towards Hamas, how we, you know, all of these differences have to dissolve when it comes down to supporting each other and our right to function in this society. I think it will just, the intensity will increase under Trump. They have the same Republicans that were in power in the House are going to be in power, and they're the ones that are bringing these horrible legislation to ban our organizations. Efforts that people are making include things like how to protect our financial resources, how to protect the staff people. But I think what we can't let it do is to intimidate us to the point where we're not going to continue this work. So let's face it, the atmosphere is a very dire one. And I guess I should not sugarcoat it when it comes to the forces that we're up against that want to see our organizations be taken away their tax-exempt status. On the other hand, I think one of the things we can do is be more proactive in some of the work that we do. And one area that I am excited about being more proactive about is about the trying to get our government to clamp down on the extremist settlers in the West Bank. And it is going to be very hard under a Trump administration to do that. We've been able to get a little bit of an opening under this administration where they've had sanctions against some individuals and against some small organizations. But there are efforts by wonderful groups like one called Dawn, Democracy in the Arab World Now, that has put forward a very well-documented dossier on some of the bigger organizations. And you know, the Jewish National Fund, which is an enormous organization and has arms, branches all over the world, and a very big one in the United States, has nonprofit status and is able to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to be going to illegal settlements, settlements that have been said by the International Court of Justice are illegal. So I think as they go after us, we have to go after them and not be intimidated.
Let's go to John Harris.
Well, it's good to see you again, Cole. And also, I want to salute Medea for the great work she's done over the years. I think it's made a big difference. But, you know, from my point of view, it's the difference that she has made has impacted the base, I think, more than the politicians. But that's just how I see it. Also, I think we may have to change our tactics a little. I think a lot of effort is being put into maneuvering among the politicians to, you know, sort of reinforce positive tendencies that are going on there as opposed to the overwhelmingly negative. And I think if we focus our message better, and in particular our demands, I think that we'll have a lot more success, in my view. That I think it's time that we just, for instance, that the masses now have been impacted. The majority don't want this war against the Palestinians. That's clearly documented. I think that the reason for that, I think, is the mobilizations that have been going on around the country, the mobilizations of the young people in the universities. And there have been huge mobilizations outside the universities, quite frankly. Hundreds of thousands of people have come out and said, no, you know, end this war immediately, cut off all aid to Israel. I think that we have to develop a a principled stand that we can mobilize many, many thousands of people around. Okay, no more aid shipments. I mean, we should be, in my opinion, demanding cut off all U.S. aid to Israel. All U.S. aid to Israel is going in one form or another into the prosecution of this genocide. And I think people are mobilizing, and when they come out into the streets, that's really what they want. And I think that's more than anything impacting public opinion. So I think it's time now, especially with this administration, to, you know, be less maneuvering and more taking a principled stand and mobilizing the many thousands of people that are willing to come out into the streets. Thank you.
Well, I think you're right in saying that even in this discussion, we've focused too much on the politicians versus on other things that we could be doing. And maybe with a Republican control of the White House, of the Senate, and of the House, it's going to be very difficult to do things there. But there are lots of other avenues. We know the BDS campaigns and ones that are just even easier things to do on a regular basis. I mean, we went into our Trader Joe's and filled up the cart with the Israeli products and took it to the manager and said, these products are dripping in blood. You know, why do you have these Israeli products here? We got to do something about this. We got so much support from the shoppers in Trader Joe's. We got support from the staff in Trader Joe's. It was amazing. And now people around the country are doing them in Trader Joe's. Now, we know there's a Jewish group that then came in, a pro-Israel Jewish group, and said, support Trader Joe's, go buy those products. And, you know, but at least you're creating some kind of, you know, activity going on, things that people can do on a Saturday, on a Sunday, a couple of people. I would say these products are everywhere. Go into the stores and find them, and then bring a couple of friends and take your video camera and put them up. And these are little things that inspire people to do more. We're now have a campaign around Netflix, because Netflix took off about 20 films on Palestine. And people started complaining, where did they go? And Netflix said the contract we had with them was up. And we said, you are a very, very, very rich company. Pay to get another contract for them. We want those films to be on. And people got very excited about that. And we went to their headquarters, and you know, people are writing in and calling and things like that, where people can really feel something small and some connection. And we hear actually that Trader Joe's has a major headquarters in Boston. I think it's not their one headquarters, their second largest. What? Oh. Whoa, you can't wear a piece of clothing that you want to wear. Yeah. That's a So yeah, Cole and Brian, it would be great to do something at their office. And you know, it is kind of gross that you can't wear a scarf that you want to wear. And so doing a keffiyeh in, where everybody goes wearing keffiyehs. Yeah.
If anyone here would like to work on a Trader Joe's project, contact Brian or me as we break up.
See, people get excited when we do things like going into stores.
I have to say that last year I protested in Trader Joe's in Brookline, which is, I believe, the second biggest in the country, perhaps. They were selling Israeli matzah, and I, along with, I think maybe it was just me, I don't know, spoke to the manager about that. Didn't do any good. But I have to say one thing, unlike maybe where Dottie works, but they are very good to me personally because I stand out for Palestine every day in there and I use their cart. And people have tried to tell me and go into the store saying I've stolen their cart. And they let me park in the parking lot and take their cart. So they know what I'm doing, and there's a lot of support in that store for Palestine. So maybe we could
Yeah.
do something there.
There's a lot of support for Palestine all over. And when we do things like that, those people sort of come out of the woodwork. And that's why I haven't been saying boycott Trader Joe's. I say go in there, and then I call their supervisor like every day to say, I haven't heard anything back from you. Have you had a response? So yeah, it's I think we can do it in ways that show that people are on our side.
Trader Joe is trying to organize, and you can get emails and support them, the movement to unionize Trader Joe's. So just encourage, I often go in there and say to the staff, when are you going on strike? And of course, they kind of duck. But I think, yeah. But I still feel frustrated in our discussion about why so many working class people voted for Trump and what we're going to do. What's the Democratic Party going to do about it? And to me, I don't know. Let me give you a little tiny instance. When you talk about the police hitting heads when the college students were protesting. Can people hear back there? No. Okay, just remember, the police are the working class, and they're doing the bidding of the upper middle class college administrators. They do the bidding of those above them. So don't make sweeping comments about police or, other groups that you would normally associate with working class. You better understand why these people voted for Trump. And I haven't heard any good analysis of that coming out of this election.
Lack of education. That's how they vote. There was a lack of education on Palestine. There was a lack of education on working class people. And that's how the Democrats, right, and the Democrats are corrupt. They're corrupt from start to finish. I've had it with them. I've been a Democrat all my life. I've had it with them.
Okay, who are we going to go? Oh, okay, I thought you were trying to raise your hand. Okay, go. Do you want to respond, Medea? I think she already spoke to this.
Yeah, just a quick one since you mentioned our friend from South Carolina, Senator Lindsey Graham, and actually Dawn, the organization that you mentioned, has been writing about this a lot lately. You may have heard his plan for the end of this war. And I think he has been working with Dick Blumenthal from Connecticut, and the Biden administration likes this as well. I'm somewhat scared about it. His plan is he'd like to get a treaty with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which would sort of lock us into their permanent defense, and they would come in and rebuild Gaza, and it would be sort of a rump state under their control. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on how realistic you think it is and what worries you might have about plans like this that might actually be selling out the Palestinians while they're being sold to us as humanitarianism.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a crazy plan, but it is scary because they are powerful, and it's a high-ranking Democrat, a high-ranking Republican. Both the Democrats and the Republicans have been trying so hard to get Saudi Arabia and Israel together. It's the gold standard of the Abraham Accords. Biden has not been able to do it. He's still trying in these last 2 months. And Saudi Arabia, you know, would love to go ahead and do it, except they're worried about the street. They're worried about their people. You know, it's the most undemocratic country in the world, but they still have to worry that there might be an uprising. So they have said, you know, we're not going to do this as long as there is no an end to the killing, but also they say we want to see the solution for the Palestinians. But the way that it's being then packaged is that you, Saudis, will have a role in determining the future of the Palestinians. And you and the UAE have the money. You can rebuild this place. You can make it bloom. You can have the hotels by the shore, you know, the things that Jared Kushner wants to go in with you on. And the only problem is the Palestinians. And as you say, you know, they have not been fighting and dying by the tens of thousands, if not over 100,000, to then turn this over to these two dictatorial countries. And I just don't think there's any way in hell that that plan is going to be able to be implemented on the ground. I think if they came in to do it, they would be in the middle of an ongoing military attacks by people inside the Gaza Strip.
I'm going to take a question. I'll call on Fawaz next. I'm concerned about unity in the movement. In the Iraq War period, we had United for Peace and Justice. I think it had 1,200 member organizations. We had local committees in almost every town in Massachusetts, and they were all united into a structure. And then there were major national demonstrations a couple times a year. We don't have that quite now, right? So we have a lot of effective organizations that have jumped up. Some existed before, some have sprung into existence in the last year, but we don't have a single coalition that's taking this on and make it into a solid force. What's your take on the situation there?
Well, in the beginning, I thought that it was good that there were all of these local organizations and then national organizations that had their own chapters and were doing their own thing and doing it quite effectively. I mean, look at Jewish Voice for Peace and the way they've been able to carry out fantastic mobilizations on the lowdown, very quietly. I mean, it's very hard for you to find out what they're going to do, where they're going to pop up, and then they pop up. And that's very effective organizing. On the in the other hand, it means that there isn't this coalition that we did have earlier on. There are groups that can mobilize on the street, like Answer PSL, like Palestine Youth Movement, and then there's others who have taken on the issue of working in the political realm. So people have kind of found their niche and been doing their own thing. In this new atmosphere where we're going to be so under attack, I think there has to be a lot more coordination. So I agree with you. I would be very much in favor of, even if it's in a loose way, of people having a network that we can be part of and that we can do a better job of supporting each other, especially in what looks like a very, very unsupportive atmosphere.
Yeah, it's just about the Saudi Arabia issue. Many people don't understand the demands of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia knows exactly their position and why they have the power to do this, and this is why they're bargaining big. And part of what MBS wants is nuclear. And this is the biggest problem for the United States and others. See, what happened in United Arab Emirates, MBS will not allow this to happen in Saudi Arabia, and he knows no matter how much the United States might try, taking the Al Saud family out is not like other places in the Gulf. And this is why he's bargaining with everything. And this is basically the biggest problem beside the Palestinian issue, because that's the nuclear in Saudi Arabia. And he does want nuclear and weapons because he doesn't want to be eaten alive like what happened to the other countries. That's why I doubt that any of that will happen. But then Trump is going to go there and take the money anyways, like he did last time. Now, how much they can depart with money without having to do anything else, still to be seen. But I honestly doubt that the Palestinian issue will change for Saudi Arabia, at least in the foreseen future.
Saudi Arabia is key to what's going to happen here. Absolutely key. And it's really scary to have this extremely dictatorial country that is going to determine a lot of what possible solutions there might be. And Saudi Arabia is playing it brilliantly. They want nuclear power, which is, as many see, on the road to nuclear weapons. They wanted the US to do it. The US balked. They went towards the Chinese. And they want a security deal with the United States, which Biden administration is negotiating right now, that the US, that we and our military will protect the butcher, MBS, in Saudi Arabia from his own people. And in the meantime, what is happening on the other side is that Saudi Arabia and Iran, which were once enemies, thanks to the Chinese negotiations, have come together. And there is a new relationship. And with the US and Israel threatening to attack Iran, Iran is now looking towards Saudi Arabia for help, as they're looking towards North Korea, as they're looking towards China, as they're looking towards Russia. So there's a lot of moving pieces in this right now. But let's never think that anything good will come of a closer US relationship with Saudi Arabia.
I am going to an anti-Semitism workshop, but I think the cause of anti-Semitism needs to come from the European and American Jews. What do you think? Or do the rest of us have to play the part in it too?
Well, certainly it's first and foremost the Jewish community that should be standing up and saying, this is how we define anti-Semitism. And Europe, it is a huge issue in Europe. I mean, Germany, they can't get over, what they did to the Jews, and now are turning cartwheels and bending backwards and everything to define everything as anti-Semitism. And you know what this is doing? This is helping the right wing. It's helping the right wing all over Germany, and it's actually building anti-Semitism. And I think what we have to be clear about is, one, anti-Semitism is real and we have to fight it. Two, what is building anti-Semitism right now is genocide. And if you stop the genocide, you will help very much to stop anti-Semitism.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Ms. Benjamin. I'm actually going to ask a question that was asked of me to ask you. In terms of specifically divestment, as you know, there were some cases on university campuses where the students demanded concessions, but in a case like Brown University, they met and then the board decided to not agree to some form of divestment or another. Some municipalities also have pursued that in terms of where they have investments. Are there any cases recently that either you or someone maybe who has expertise in Code Pink have looked at and are developing a game plan in that regard? Thank you.
Yeah, it's an excellent question that I don't know the answer to because I've been so focused on the congressional side. I know that, yes, as you say, the universities are trying it and students have, they just had a meeting of Students for Justice in Palestine, and they were talking about, which of the campuses did they actually get some movement on, and what they came up with is that it's the campuses that had the least investments. It was the poorer universities. Not the elite colleges. And it wasn't just the issue of the difficulty of getting a divestment, it was the difficulty of going against the big donors to those universities. Because, it's not that hard to divest. It's the message that divestment sends. And there's also, been efforts to get cities to divest. San Francisco has tried that. Berkeley has tried that. There have been efforts among unions to get their unions to divest. There are churches who have tried divestment, and some have been successful in getting divestment, not just now, but from weapons companies in general. So there are successful examples of divestment, and certainly if you look at the fossil fuel efforts for divestment, they created a real roadmap for how to push divestment in your pension fund, in your university, and all of that. So yes, there are good examples, but I think it is getting harder and harder as there is this conflagration between BDS and anti-Semitism.
Okay. I'm going to go to a different person. Go ahead.
Why did Hamas attack Israel? What was the reason for doing that? That's what started this whole mess between Israel and Palestinians.
Well, we can talk afterwards at more length, but I think we've been here, for a long time. In general, I think it's really important to be talking about context, that history did not start on October 7th, that the Nakba from 1948, which most of us were never taught about, never ended. And having been myself to Gaza many times, I know how difficult it has been for people to live under those conditions, just like how difficult it has been on the West Bank for people to live in those conditions. And if any of you, how many people have been or are from or have been to the West Bank or to Gaza, just even on the level of the humiliation daily that you go through when you get to those checkpoints. I mean, I just can't believe the kind of patience that people have had, and there was so many times that they have tried so many nonviolent ways to change the situation. October 7th was the result of the inability to change it through other means.
So we're going to wind down. We can continue informal discussion afterwards. A couple of organizing announcements. MAPA gave you 2 weeks off of webinars during the election, but now we're coming back. Tomorrow night we have 2 webinars coming up with leaders evaluating the election results, the new political terrain. Tomorrow night we got Stephen Kinzer. He's a Globe columnist, former New York Times columnist, lives in Massachusetts. He'll be talking about the situation in Ukraine and Gaza and the world tomorrow night. And then Curry Peterson Smith, he's a local scholar with Institute for Policy Studies, young activist scholar who's going to talk Wednesday night at 6 o'clock, earlier than our usual hour. We have our organizing meeting for our Gaza, Israel, Mideast Peace Campaign every Wednesday, usually at 5:30, and please join. And if you're not on that list, please contact me or sign up. But this Wednesday we'll start at 5 instead of 5:30 because of Curry's talk. And then finally, next Saturday, we got one more. We got a Live from Palestine webinar with the Badil organization, which is a resistance NGO in Bethlehem. They will have 4 Palestinian speakers. I think one is from Gaza, the other's from the West Bank, talking about the conditions there. Finally, as I mentioned before, we'll be gathering 12:30 Wednesday at the JFK Federal Building to call for cutoff of arms shipments to Israel for Senators Markey and Warren. So join us there. With that, we can wrap it up with thanks to Medea. Yes. What is on Tuesday? Oh, the standout, yeah.
This is something we've been doing for the past 2-3 weeks, and every Tuesday from 12 to 1, we stand out in front of the consulate in 20 Park Plaza in Boston. Please join us. Last couple of weeks, we had Local 26 striking next door. So we picketed with them, they picketed with us. Now they solved the problem, so we're alone. So please, if anybody can come or spread the word, join, or have somebody join, it will be good to annoy them actually annoy their neighbors, hopefully. They will kick them out. And that's Tuesday, 12 to 1, which we think is going to be an every week kind of thing for now, just like we did with Elbit and got them out. Let's see if we can do something to here too. Thank you.
Thank you, Fawaz. And that one is the Boston Coalition for Palestine, which is a coalition of 47 groups. So come out and support that. It's masspeaceaction.org. Mass, MASSPEACE, action.org. And click on events. You'll see all of these events listed. Yeah.
And you are very lucky to have a group like Mass Peace Action in your state. Absolutely fantastic.
And we are very lucky to. And we are very lucky to have Code Pink in Washington, D.C., chasing all of these war makers down. Thank you, Medea Benjamin. We are so grateful to see you. Thank you for everything you do. We can break up and discuss informally. You don't have to leave right away. But we do have to clear out in about 15 minutes.